why is this so hard? And nothing seems to be working out for me. And I questioned, everything that I was doing. And, I felt off my game. And instead of realizing it was just my cycle coming into play,
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO.
I don't know about you, but anytime I think about my period, it hasn't been something that I'm cheering about. However, my guest today, Megan Rempel, is a hormone specialist, actually a registered nurse as well, who talks to us about how to use our natural cycle as women to increase our energy, our focus, and our power. Now, I don't know about you, but that is something I want. So let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Call Me CEO. And today is talking about using your cycle for power instead of overwhelm with Megan Rempel, who is the creator of the Syncing with the Flow. And I'm so excited to talk about this today because I feel like as women, all of the years growing up, we look at our period and the flow of our period as something to disdain and something to feel sad about. And yes, there are pieces of that journey that aren't the most wonderful, but Megan is here to help us embrace it and turn it into a superpower. So Megan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Camille, for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with yourself and for the listeners. I think exactly what you said. We've been sort of led to believe that our period is this thing that we should be almost ashamed of, and we should hide it, and it's an inconvenience and it's a curse. We've, as women, we got the short end of the stick, and, all of those things that sort of labels we've slapped on ourselves and that society has slapped on us as well. But the reality is our cycle is this beautiful gift that's been given to us, and we just aren't using it the way that it was designed. And I really do believe that when we were created, we were given this to use as a roadmap and use as one of our best tools that we could in order to live a really fulfilling, productive, good life. We just haven't known what to do with it, I think.
There's so much to unpack here because I feel like, I was talking with someone about this most recently that you were saying, do you understand the power of your cycle? Have you looked into this? And just last week, I met someone in person it was actually at a friend's baby shower, and she helps women identify their cycle and how you can use the phases of the moon to actually attach and understand your own hormones and emotions. And it got me really excited to talk to you today because honestly, for myself, I've never really attached a whole lot of my productivity to my cycle, or really understanding how that could affect my overall experience during the month. I've been very lucky, I guess, in the way of being able to experience periods in a way that they're there, but it's not too much of something where it knocks me out for 3 days or, something like that. And also, I think another thing that's really interesting that I want to talk about with you is how birth control can affect our cycle, because then that's incorporating hormones that aren't our own. And what do we do then if that is a part of our story that we are dealing with, artificial hormone, and which might change up your natural cycle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And, we are very much in tune with the moon, like you were saying, and this is kind of like a whole other podcast episode really, but we are cyclical human beings, and we do not run on a 24-hour clock like men do. And even like society wants us to run on. We run on a 28-day clock. And it's really important that we take that into consideration. I was just like you, Camille, and I didn't have these terrible periods. And it wasn't really ever something that bothered me. It was just more of an inconvenience, like I said. But I did notice like patterns throughout the month that I was getting very frustrated with. So I was a lot like most women. I was, an overachiever, a go-getter, do all the things, put everything on my to-do list and like work from morning till night. Like I wanted to just do it all. And I almost prided myself on being the busiest and being the most overwhelmed and the most sleep deprived and depleted. And I thought that the more I felt those things, the more I must be doing something right in life. And I really, kind of put myself on a pedestal thinking like, I've got this, like I'm killing it in my motherhood because that's how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to just be pouring into everyone else and I should feel depleted. And of course, I think we all know that that's not the case, but we get stuck on this like hamster wheel of going and doing. And at times that felt fine and it felt good and it felt energizing. But then there was a lot of times that I felt like a failure and I felt like, why is this so hard? And nothing seems to be working out for me. And I questioned, everything that I was doing. And, I felt off my game. And instead of realizing it was just my cycle coming into play, I would beat myself up and I would have a lot of negative self-talk. And I was just getting really sick and tired of those ups and downs of productivity and energy depletion. And that's when I really started looking at cycle syncing and thought like, there's gotta be something like hormonally that's happening to me because certainly this isn't how we should be feeling. Like we shouldn't be so overwhelmed and stressed out and depleted. We should be feeling really, really good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power to this. So I'm excited to dive into the tools that our listeners can use in giving themselves permission for periods of rest, giving themselves permission to tune into their bodies in a way that makes your mind and your body more of a flow together. So I love that your program is called Syncing with the Flow, because I think that is where, if you look at the busyness of life, there's so much entanglement where we do give ourselves to other people. And so the idea that we can sync our body and our mind and our spirit into this cohesiveness brings so much power. So what would you say? And just to introduce you a little bit, and I apologize for not giving you the chance to do this. You are a mother of 4 and a registered nurse. So I'm curious when that transition happened of syncing with the flow and figuring out your cycle, that you were able to create this business where you were like, okay, I'm figuring this out for myself and now I want to share it with others. Take me through that process a little bit before we dive into what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I said, I kind of gave you a little bit of a backstory of how I was feeling and just busy doing, always kind of giving to everyone else and taking pride in that. And I remember kind of like, I wouldn't say it was a rock bottom moment, but we all have those moments where we just remember where it was like, this isn't working. I need to create change. And for me, it happened a few times, but it would always be at the end of the day when my head would hit the pillow and I would just mentally go through, okay, what did I achieve today? What did I do? What did I complete? What did I finish? And I would be like, yes, awesome. Okay, I'm crushing this. I'm crushing that. That's awesome. But I also had this like sucker punch to my gut because I realized like I wasn't even present with my children today. Like I yelled too much. I didn't actually sit with them ever. I was just constantly going and doing. And now I'm exhausted and I put them to bed feeling exhausted. And here I am, laying in bed thinking like, I really screwed up in that department. And I would always tell myself, okay, tomorrow is going to be better. I'm not going to take on as much. I'll spend more time with the kids. And it just kept repeating itself. And that was sort of a good wake-up call because, nobody wants to feel like that in their parenting. And I felt really disconnected from my kids and felt like I was just there doing a job instead of really feeling their presence and feeling that connection that I wanted to be feeling with them. And that was, the wake up call that I felt in that moment was, well, I'm not even connected to myself. like, I'm not even aware of how I'm feeling or what's happening within my own body. How am I ever supposed to be present with anything that's right in front of me? And I had really resisted the idea of cycle syncing because to me, what I understood from it, and I didn't even look into it, it was just what I assumed it meant, was that when you're on your period, you do nothing and you put on your jammies and you watch Netflix and you use it as an excuse as to why you can't do anything for, a week or so. And I did not want to be that person. I didn't want to ever have a reason as to why I couldn't do all of the things that I needed to do. So I kept just pushing it away, but I swear the universe was just like, look at cycle syncing, Megan. Like you need to learn about this and you need to embody it. And I finally did look at it because, I was doing all of the things at this point. I was eating healthy. I was moving my body. I had all these healthy routines, a morning routine, and I was, taking care of myself. But it was almost like I was just checking the boxes, like, oh, I worked out. Oh, I'm eating healthy. I got up early before my kids. I'm reading good books. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm staying off my phone an hour before bed. I was doing those things, but even still, I was feeling that disconnection. And I knew that there had to be like something else that I needed to incorporate because, like I said, there was moments where things felt easy and really good. And then there was moments where things felt so hard. And I felt like, what is wrong with me? Like, why were these things so easy and effortlessly last week? And now this week, I don't even want to be around anyone. And I don't want to eat healthy. I don't want to work out. And that sort of led me into, all right, I'm going to look at this. And as soon as I started learning about cycle syncing, it became this thing that I knew I had to share. I knew that women needed this information. And I also felt it was really important for me as a mom I have 4 kids and there's 2 girls, 2 boys. I really knew that it was something I needed to learn so that my girls could learn this at a young age instead of being in their 30s and finally understanding how their body works and how to utilize it.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's dive into that. It's funny because my daughter actually has maturation on Friday, which is in 2 days from right now. And so I would love for her to step into that space with power and knowledge. So I want you to imagine that. Wouldn't that be nice if they taught that in maturation? Not like this is just what happens. This is what happens with your body, but it was like, let's talk about how to use this as a benefit to you and the way that your body works. So imagine for me, if you will, that you are teaching a maturation class to 11 and 12-year-olds. How would you explain cycle syncing?
Yeah, I love that question. Actually, nobody's ever really asked me to explain it in a way that young adults, children even would understand it. But I can definitely do that because I've always tried to keep this super simple for myself and also for other women. But it's so important for us to realize that we are not the same version of ourselves week to week. We are completely different. And hopefully that feels really good and sort of like a weight's been lifted off our shoulders. And it's like, oh my gosh, I finally have permission to feel what I've been feeling and to be a little bit kinder to myself. So what I mean by that is in our monthly cycle, we actually go through 4 different phases. So most of us know about our period, our menstrual phase. And then we also have this other phase that is called our ovulatory phase, where that is when we conceive a baby. That's when we're most fertile. Other than that, we really don't know, well, I didn't, a whole lot about our cycle, but we go through 4 very distinct phases throughout the month. And the really cool thing, and I think this is where, young adults will really be able to understand this, is that they really line up with the seasons of Mother Nature. So I'm in Canada, we experience spring, summer, fall, and winter, exactly by the textbook. Like every season is very different. And so I can kind of take you through what those seasons are and, kind of make it work for our cycle. So when our bleed stops, so when your period is over, you enter into what's called the follicular phase. And this is our spring phase. So if you can just remember that after your bleed stops, you are in your springtime phase. And this lasts anywhere from about 7 to 10 days. And it's exactly like what spring is. Right now, we're experiencing spring where I live, and it's energetic. It feels good. It feels exciting. It's hopeful. You're feeling kind of lighter and creative and excited. And then after spring, we head into summer, which is a shorter phase, but it's about 3 to 5 days for most women. And this is, our high energy phase. This is when we are magnetic. This is when we can do all of the things. This is when you can wake up at the crack of dawn, bust out an intense workout, do an awesome morning routine, go work a 12-hour day, have a, dinner party afterwards, stay up late with your husband and repeat it again the next day. And you're going to feel really good and energized doing that. The problem is that we as women, we're typically trying to live our life in that high energy phase. And it's only a short window. We're not meant to be going at that pace all month long, which is why we're getting burnt out and why we're feeling so overwhelmed and why there's so much anxiety and depression happening. And then, of course, after the ovulatory phase, we head into what's called our luteal phase, and that is fall. So this is the longest phase of our cycle, and it takes us right up to our bleed. So it's anywhere from 10 to 14 days, and it's exactly what fall is like. Things are starting to get a little bit colder. We're starting to hunker down. We are, thinking about what do we need to wrap up and organize and finish. And we tend to go a little bit more inward with our energy. We're slowing down. We don't necessarily want to be out there socializing, and, we're not as creative. We're just a little bit more withdrawn, but we're super productive still in this phase. And then, of course, we head into our winter phase, which of course is our menstrual phase. And this lasts, 3 to 7 days for women. And this is when we are really just hunkering down. It's winter time. It is time to rest. It is time to restore. We don't want to be doing so much. Instead, we want to be in that more being energy. So really in that feminine energy. And this is such a great time to be reflecting and evaluating and planning out sort of our next phase of our cycle. It's almost like, I always think of the menstrual phase as, that time in between Christmas and New Year's where it's like that lull and you're like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like something big is coming and it's going to be really exciting, but I'm not there yet. And I don't really know what to do. I always think of that sort of like the menstrual phase. We're just we're in limbo and we're just kind of getting ready for what's going to be coming around the corner, which of course is spring and a fresh new beginning. So that's sort of in a very small nutshell, the 4 phases of our cycle. Of course, we can go into depth into so many different areas of our life and how that works. But hopefully that kind of gives you a good little insight.
Yeah, I think that that's really insightful. I like the idea of associating it to nature and that it's a part of a cycle that can be used for our good. It's funny because as you were just describing that, I have actually been on an IUD for years between each of my kids, but I've always maintained a cycle until very recently, which I'm excited to get my IUD taken out because I really want to tune into my natural cycle and what that looks like. So how does this apply to people who have an IUD, for example? Because for most people that I know, even with an IUD and you stop menstruating, and my experience was not that way, but what would you say for women who are in that situation?
Yeah. So first of all, I will say this definitely isn't like my area of expertise, but what I will say is that, unfortunately, when you're on any type of hormonal birth control, your hormone levels are not fluctuating the way that they would be if you weren't taking any type of birth control. So unfortunately, you're not going through those dips and highs within the phases. So you're not fully experiencing each of the 4 phases. However, that doesn't mean that you can't live this cyclical lifestyle, because of course your hormones are still fluctuating, but a lot of the times they're kind of being chemically induced to be fluctuating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the really cool thing is that we are women to our core, and we are cyclical beings. And that means that we can embody this lifestyle. And that's where aligning your lifestyle to the phases of the moon comes into play. And that might sound like really out there for some people. I know it did for me in the beginning, but as women, we're very connected to the phases of the moon, because just like us, the moon goes through 4 phases, and they are sort of on a 28-day clock as well. So each of the phases of the moon correlate to the 4 phases that we go through as women. So if you're not experiencing a bleed and you're not able to identify, okay, this is my menstrual phase, you can actually look up what phase of the moon we're in right now. And that will be the phase that you are in your cycle, if that makes sense. So for instance, like I think it's March 31st or 30th. I don't even know what March 30th when we're recording this. I think that there's a new moon on April 1st. So for anyone who's not experiencing a bleed, the new moon is the same energy as your menstrual phase. So when the new moon hits, that would be your menstrual phase. And when the full moon hits, that would be your ovulatory phase. So if you can kind of remember that, and then you can sort of align yourself. So that's like a whole other podcast subject as well. But just to kind of give the listeners like a little like tip, is they could just figure out the phases of the moon, and then they could embody that energy.
I think that's really insightful. And I don't think it's too woo. I mean, I'm very open to that kind of thing. I'm actually wearing a moonstone today. A friend of mine, she just created a line with Sense of Style. She's on the podcast. If you go a few episodes back, it's Courtney Brown. And she has she talks about the phases of the moon as well as women, and also just allowing yourself those phases. And so I would think if you're not menstruating, perhaps you can pay attention to the energy and turn inward and see what those phases are, and take note of them in your notebook and just say, I'm feeling really energized these days. These days I was feeling more introverted. Perhaps that's an idea of how someone could feel in tune with that if they were on birth control and not able to see exactly what those phases were for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about awareness. And I think that's what cycle syncing has done for myself specifically, is it's given me this like permission slip to evaluate and be okay with how I'm feeling at certain times, because it's like, it makes sense. It makes sense that, oh, I'm feeling this way because I'm in my luteal phase, and I can then give myself some grace instead of trying to just like, you're fine, put your big girl pants on, like, let's go. You can like, sleep is for the weak. That's something that I used to always like say to myself when I was tired and just wanted to stop. I'm like, no, you got to hustle. You got to go. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So having that awareness of, this is how I'm feeling, and, get your journal out and just quickly jot down each day or every few days, just how you've been feeling, and start to pay attention.
Yeah, I like that. Now, in your introduction, your bio that I will share at the beginning of this episode, you talked about how understanding your cycle helps you actually to gain more energy. How would you explain that piece of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is we shouldn't be feeling so exhausted and overwhelmed. We shouldn't be having those feelings, but so many of us are. And like I said, we have these phases in our cycle where we have a lot of energy, and we're in our high energy phases, and then we have the low energy phases. But just because you have low energy doesn't mean that you need to feel exhausted and depleted. You can still feel really good when you have low energy. But the problem is, when we're not in alignment with our cycle, we're just pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to do all the things because that's what we think we need to be doing. And it's leaving us feeling exhausted when we get to those lower energy phases, because we haven't been honoring where we're at in our cycle. And when you can become aware of where your high energy phases are, you can take advantage of them. You can really do a lot in those phases, and you can strategically plan things for when you're in those spring and summer phases. That way, when you get to your luteal phase, which is your fall phase, which is typically when women experience PMS, and side note, PMS is not normal. It's a sign that your body's not in alignment. But when you get to that luteal phase, you can still feel just really good, even though you have low energy.
Okay, we're going to go there. Because I have some friends I've heard a few things where I have a friend who says, man, I've been so grumpy, and I don't know why it's always such a surprise to me when I look at the calendar and realize I'm about to have my period. I have been so mad. So I have people who have said that to me. I've also had people say that their hormones are going up and going down in very, I don't know, roller coastery, and that's not a word, but like I do know people who very much their cycle affects their mood to the point where their spouse avoids them, their kids avoid them, they want to avoid themselves. What would you say to that person who's struggling with that?
Yeah. And I think that so many women are struggling with that. And the problem is we've believed that that's normal. And do we really think that we've been given this like curse and that we deserve to feel like that every single month? Like, that doesn't make sense. We're human beings. We're supposed to feel vibrant and alive and really, really good. So why would we think that it's normal to feel that low and crummy and off once a month? It just doesn't really make sense. And again, our bodies are always communicating with us, and we need to pay attention. The week before your cycle, you should still feel really good. You're going to feel different because you're a different version of yourself in the luteal phase, and you're going to feel lower energy and more withdrawn. You might be more like irritated and a little bit irritable, but it shouldn't be to the point where your family literally doesn't want anything to do with you. What's really interesting about the luteal phase, so again, that's your fall phase, which leads up to your period. When you're in that luteal phase, you have a lot of like clear thinking. Surprisingly, most women wouldn't think that that's true, but you really do, especially if you're aligning your life to the different phases of your cycle. You have a lot of brain clarity, and your brain is very powerful. Estrogen is at its lowest in the luteal phase, and estrogen tends to have this masking effect. So when we're in our high energy phases, so spring and summer, estrogen is at its highest, and estrogen makes us feel really good. It makes us feel happy and attractive and confident. And there's issues in all of our lives. We're all dealing with things that we need to work on or that we're avoiding, things that we need to acknowledge and kind of work through. Estrogen masks all of that. So when we're in our spring and summer phase, it's like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm good. We'll deal with that later. And then you get to the luteal phase, and estrogen is rock bottom. And all of a sudden, you are so aware of everything in your life that is feeling off and triggering you. And yes, that might be your husband. It doesn't mean that you need to leave him or sell your children. It just means that like you're feeling things kind of at a deeper level. And it's a great opportunity for you to evaluate and take note of how you're feeling, because it could be an indication that just something's off and that you do need to deal with something or, stop avoiding a certain issue. And the menstrual phase is then a really great time for you to unpack all of that and really sit with that. And then, of course, you head into spring, and that's when you can take action on anything that you do want to change.
This episode is brought to you by Station Park, who believes in women-led businesses that are changing the world. If you want a place to come visit, to dine, shop, or connect with your loved ones, Station Park is only 20 minutes away from downtown Salt Lake City and has a gorgeous outdoor dining and shopping experience that you can walk among the shops and create memories that will last forever. If you happen to be in the middle of the square, Twig's restaurant is right there in the middle, one of my very favorites. You've got to get the pesto margarita chicken and end the night with the dipping donuts. Trust me, tell them I sent you. It will change your life.
But going back to the PMS, it's not normal. It's a sign that you're not living in alignment with your cycle. You're more than likely doing way too much in the wrong phases. You're not honoring your body. And a lot of it has to do with the food that we're consuming as well throughout our cycle. So aligning your nutrition to the 4 phases of your cycle can be so powerful. And when I started cycle syncing, the first thing that I did was I switched up my movement depending on where I was at. And I started just changing my foods just a little bit, like not completely, because that would be very overwhelming, but I just started adding in phase specific foods that would help support my body with where I was at. And just doing those 2 things, I completely got rid of my PMS symptoms. I didn't have anything crazy, but I would always have a lot of spotting, which would be so frustrating. And again, I thought that was normal. It's not normal. Our bleed should start ideally in the morning. It should be bright red and it should just happen like that. It should really kind of come as like, oh, wow, like here we go. Instead of like days of, is it starting? Is it, oh, it's there. Oh, no, it's gone. Oh, it's coming. Oh, maybe. And that was one thing that I noticed for sure was the spotting, and also just that exhaustion that I would feel before my period, that went away. The breast tenderness would be kind of severe at some points for me, and even the cramping. Those things, after a few months of just changing my movement and nutrition, were gone. And I started to experience what an actual bleed should really be like. And it wasn't, this awful thing anymore. It was just this thing that was giving me a lot of power, actually.
So for those who are listening and curious right now that are like, yeah, I could use some of that food, what foods would you say are best to eat in the luteal phase?
So the luteal phase is probably it's my favorite phase altogether. I love it for so many reasons, but I also really love it because of the food. So you need more calories when you're in the luteal phase. So keep that in mind, because what happens is, especially women who are eating healthy and living like a healthy lifestyle, and I don't want to say dieting, but just maybe keeping track of what they're eating because they're trying to lose weight or tone up, whatever the case may be. If you're trying to eat the same way that you were in your follicular and ovulatory phase, and you get to the luteal phase and you're trying to keep that up, you're going to be so hungry. Like you're just not going to be nourished. And that's going to lead you to probably fall off track, binge, and then you'll tell yourself, oh, I'm a failure and I'll start again on Monday. And it starts this like really unhealthy pattern that, I got caught up in, and I'm sure other women did as well. But in the luteal phase, you want to increase your calories, but the best way to do this is through roasted root vegetables. So anything like carrots, turnips, parsnips, beets, sweet potatoes, all of those things are higher in calories. Plus, they have this sweetness to them when you roast them, which helps curb that craving and your body's need for sort of that comfort and something sweet before your period. So it can really help you stay on track with your nutrition throughout the luteal phase. But also, the roasted root vegetables help your body to metabolize any excess estrogen that is lingering. So estrogen peaks in the ovulatory phase, and then it lowers. But what happens is a lot of it stays in our body, and that can manifest as PMS symptoms. So the root vegetables will really help just to excrete that out of the body, making you feel really, really good.
That's interesting. Okay. Are there any other foods you don't have to roast that are a little easier if you're not in a place to roast vegetables? I know I need to do that more.
Yeah, I think just, those starchier those starchier vegetables are just really, really, really helpful. Warming foods, because our body tends to be at like a cooler temperature when we're in the luteal phase and the menstrual phase. And just, if you almost think of like eating seasonally, we hear a lot about,
Yes.
eat seasonally. That's like the best thing to do for your body. Well, eat seasonally throughout the month even. So when you're in your spring and summer phase, go for those lighter, fresh, vibrant foods, lots of salads and stir fries and smoothies. And then as you head into the fall and winter phase, that's when you want to be getting in more of those like comforting, warming foods. Of course, when people hear comfort foods, it's like mac and cheese, like keep it healthy, but go for like the stews and the soups and the casseroles and, the roasted foods. That's really going to help your body, and it's going to feel supported and nourished, instead of, getting to your menstrual phase and trying to eat smoothies and salads and deplete your calories. That's going to backfire big time. And what you do in one phase is going to affect you in the coming phases as well. So it's just this like stacking effect that you can have.
That's awesome. One product that I love is a product called Mix Hers, which is a product made to give you the specific nutrients that you're missing during the PMS phases, as well as the entire cycle of the month. I have a code and a link below in the information. I believe my code is Camille 10 that will give you 10% off. I'll make sure to link it to here, but it has actually helped a lot of my friends alleviate cysts, as well as cramping and hormonal imbalance. So make sure to check that out. Now, I want to talk to you about your program with Syncing with the Flow. You've been doing this since 2015 as a registered nurse. Tell our audience where they can find more information about that and the first steps to take towards understanding their own cycle.
Yeah. So if you follow me over on Instagram, you can click the link in my bio, and I actually have a freebie in my bio that will get you started on cycle syncing like right away. It's important to realize that cycle syncing isn't this thing that's going to require, more time from you. It's not something that you have to say like, okay, well, I'll look at that in a couple of months. Like right now I'm just too busy to take that on. It's not like that. It's something that you can start just implementing right away and become aware of. And ideally, it's going to actually remove a lot off your plate and show you that you do have a lot more time in your day than you think you do, because you're going to start taking advantage of the 4 phases and utilize them, which creates a lot more space in your life. I'm always sharing about cycle syncing on my feed and in my stories. So I love just kind of being honest about where I'm at in my cycle and sharing tips and things that I'm doing and what I'm eating. So you can learn a lot just from following someone for sure on Instagram. And then I do have a program that I take women through each month, and it's like a DIY program, but I also like to support them because it requires changes to your fitness routine and to your nutrition. And it's just always much more fun doing that kind of in a group setting. So you can check out the details in my bio as well.
That's awesome. I think this has been so powerful and positive. And I want to learn more about the foods to eat, because I feel like that alone is so powerful with understanding the phases you're in and letting your body be a process with that, of what we're putting into our body, as well as what we're doing with what's coming out. Like it's really such, women's bodies are so complicated and so beautiful. And I think that knowledge is power. And so you have given us so much power today. I really am grateful that you came on the show today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. And I want to thank Station Park for being our sponsor. One thing that I love about Station Park is that it is the perfect place to make and keep connections with your families and those that you love. Take time for your health and your body, as they have many places to work out as well. There's Lift, Station Park, there is Hot Body Works, and there's also the Body Bar. Anytime you take time for you, you are taking time for your family's health, because when you're healthy, it helps your family be healthy as well. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I feel like I need to go find some root vegetables and be more in control of what is happening inside and on the outside of my body. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. I would love to hear from you. And if you have ideas of episodes you'd like to hear or people you want to hear from, please message me on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast or at CamilleWalker.co. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.